Hey, how's it going, everyone? Welcome to a new episode of Friend Code. I'm joined by Matt Simmons of Yo Video Games,
Hey everyone.
freshly returned from the Aloha State, right?
Yeah, I was really living that Chrono Cross remastered life.
uh,
I got so impressed by the backgrounds in that game. I had to go see if they were real somewhere, and they spoiler alert, they are. Um, just watch out, you will get sunburn if you got my
yeah.
complexion.
Must have been relaxing though to get out there and stuff. I'm sure. Was it like as beautiful as you thought it would be, like, or more beautiful, or maybe not as impressive as you thought? Like just like the scenery and stuff. Because
The scenery is gorgeous. Especially like for me because it's funny because like this is why I'm such like a big Xeno guy is because I love environments and I love really beautiful environments in gaming. So like the the sort of far like like the big mountain ranges and the stuff like that and the wildlife and like the more rural stuff looks great. The beaches look great for the most part. um so yeah, in that sense, it's really gorgeous because I went to Jurassic Park. um and, and like
yes.
it's funny how it must have been real hilarious for people when that movie came out, because it was, if you lived on that island, like it probably was just like going to work for you. And it's supposed to be this crazy tropical oasis off the coast of Costa Rica or whatever. And it's like, no, bro, that's that's Nepali cliffs. Like, that's just down the street or whatever, or that's down this highway kind of thing. Um, but yeah, it was cool because like I did, like it was like half adventurous, half just super relaxing. Um, I mean, if you got a travel bug and you kind of want to know, Hawaii is kind of like a middle ground between best coast. I'm sorry, west coast, best coast, like style of current and temperature, and somewhere between like say the Gulf of Mexico, Caribbean, where it's humid, but it's not as humid as say if you're like a Florida native who lives like in the Keys or something. I don't know. I don't know if any of your listeners do, but like if you've ever been, because I think you've probably been to Florida before and been to the beach. I think it's really humid down there, and Hawaii's humid, but not as humid. More breezy, more windy there. So, and you definitely get like surfable, waves in some spots. So it's like, yeah, it's pretty cool. For me, it was just kind of like, yeah, I'm like, it's like being in Chrono Cross. um, so that was actually pretty fun. And yeah, I'm such a nerd because like for Christmas in 2019, so December 20, I got this underwater MP3 player. But it was December 2019, so you can imagine how much I got to use it. Right after that, none. So this was the first time I actually got to go and use it. So if when I'm snorkeling around in like coral reef area and stuff, I've got Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze and Chrono Cross music playing because that's the kind of nerd I am.
That's what I'd be
I
doing, man.
I just want to hear David Wise and
Yep.
Yasunori Mitsuda,
Aquatic
as I'm
ambience, man, from
swimming around.
PKC.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
How do those like work actually? Underwater headphones? Are they just like normal looking? Like I've never looked at them. I have
They've
no
got
idea.
like they've got like particular like special like type of rubber earbuds like right on the tip, and they kind of like really jam in and kind of create like a suction.
Okay,
Um,
so actually, I was wondering how that would work. Yeah, with like water getting in there, if it's airtight or something.
yeah, it's like a weird suction type of thing on there, and then they're just the rest of it's like all encased and like coated in like certain like types of whatever plastic or rubber or whatever, so just super waterproof stuff. So
Pretty
it
cool.
works. It works.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a lot of fun, but it was my first time really getting out of the house in a couple of years. So, but it was something I planned with my other co-host for Yo Video Games podcast with Andrew. Like we planned this for years, many years, maybe even a decade, possibly. We just never got around to it.
Pretty cool.
So,
You didn't get a chance to sneak by Mistwalker's offices there by any
bro,
chance?
that crossed my mind when I was out there, and I was kind of like, I wonder if I'll see Sakaguchi surfing.
yeah.
Like, how wild would that
That'd
be?
be so cool.
You
Oh
know,
man.
get on like, can you port Last Story to Switch?
Oh man, man, man. But yeah, it sounds like good times. I need to get myself out there at some point. I've never been to Hawaii, on my list of places to go, along with like New Zealand and Australia at some point, just
Yeah,
to get over
it's
there.
definitely one of two things. It's either like I don't want to do anything but sit in a hammock or on the beach, or it's I want to go kayaking and hiking, and like mega surfing. It's not like, well, at least where I went, because I went to the Garden Isle, so it was like it's not it was not a cornucopia of like entertainment stuff. Like there's no theme parks there. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
it's not Disney World.
yeah.
So if you want that sort of like really resorty, pampered style thing, there is Oahu, which I have no idea because I didn't go to that island, and then there is Florida for that. But kind of depends on what you're looking for. I think you gotta like and there's always ways to find good affordable trips out there. I honestly feel if you just do a little bit of digging, you also gotta know what you want, because for some people like it's not going to be that exciting, to just be on a beach or snorkeling or whatever. If you're like super gamer, it's like you should. I mean, this will be a lot more expensive, but like plan a trip in your life for Akihabara, because that is its own weird nerd oasis. There's so much like gaming and anime and deviant anime stores all over that part of Tokyo, which I think you've been there too, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, like
been
you
a
go see
while.
like you go see Super Potato and stuff like that. So um yeah, it kind of just depends on what you're looking for. So um
I'll
but just know.
say I'll say I'm not gonna go to any secluded beaches anytime soon because I
Mm,
just watched Old on HBO.
oh no.
Like very cool premise. I'll say that. I'm not gonna spoil anything for anyone to see yet.
Yeah.
Really good premise. Just the whoever writes the dialogue, or it's M Night Shyamalan or whoever, just terrible dialogue, man. It's so stilted
Mm.
and jarring. It's just people do not come off naturally in his films anymore. In this one, so it's like the characters kind of stink in it. I feel like,
I mean, I
yeah.
just beat Xenosaga Trilogy. It can't be any worse than that.
No, it's probably better than that. I'll give it that. But like yeah, really cool, like almost kind of like scientific explanation for what's going on. I kind of like that, and I almost kind of see like the point of it without saying too much more. But anyway,
Yeah.
yeah, the whole premise is they go to a secluded beach. It's like, oh, it's away from everything else. It's very exclusive, and then like you're fucked. It's
It was funny. I went to
like-
what was considered a sort of out of the way, hard to get to beach, and it still had a ton of people there in Hawaii. Anyways, I've been to places in the Caribbean where like I will see 5 people in the span of a week. Um, and then in Hawaii, it was just like you could go to you can go the more quote unquote quieter or the more like, hey, this is a little out of the way, but it's got good vistas or good views. And it's like, hey, you get there, there's like 50 to 100, 200 people there. And you're like, okay, it's not that secluded. But
yeah.
whatever, it's fine.
Well, you did say you hope that maybe Mistwalker would put you know, Lost Odyssey on Switch. Is
Oh,
you know,
Lost Odyssey. That, I mean, yeah, I'd be generous if Microsoft did that.
just kidding. Sorry,
I mean, they could. They
sorry,
allowed
wait,
Banjo.
what did you say? Sorry,
Last Story.
Last Story. Gosh darn it. Sorry,
That was the
I'll
three.
take-
That was
yeah.
the 3 games. There's
Yeah,
Blue
like-
Dragon, Lost
I
Odyssey.
said Lost Odyssey,
Last
didn't I?
Story.
My bad. Last
Yeah.
Story. Last Story. Yeah. That one, yeah. Like, very interesting. I'd love to see them get another crack, like, get a remaster of that.
Yeah,
Um,
it needs something more like a remaster slash remake, because it definitely doesn't need just like a really quick and dirty like port or upscale, because it was a really cool game and had really cool ideas, but you could see it just like straight up like choking the life out of the Wii hardware.
It's
Like it really
Mm,
needed
better.
better specs or just more RAM or something. It just needed optimization. Like it needed more stuff under the hood to run what it was wanted to do, because it was a really cool game.
Yeah.
And again, the battle system was great, but boy, did it needed more hardware.
And
So
yeah. Speaking of hardware, I mean, it's kind of the topic of conversation
and
for this
he-
episode.
yeah,
Though we're not.
and here we are.
Here we are. So we're not going to talk about Switch 2, Switch Pro, or anything like that in sense of like what like that type of episode. Instead, we got a quote.
They gave us enough to chew on from that this same investor meeting.
Yeah. So the investor Q&A from the recent financial briefing where, Switch still setting records, software still selling, games still selling well. We don't really need to dive into that because that was kind of like last week's focus, especially on the Easy Allies podcast. We covered that. I was on that episode, talked in depth about that. But I did tease there that this episode would be about a specific answer that Nintendo president Shuntaro Furukawa gave in regards to the transition to the next hardware and how
And
they are concerned with making that as smooth as possible.
yeah, and this is something that I think it came up last year, but I think it's getting even more. How do you say? It's becoming even more relevant, or just more. I think it's this thing Nintendo's like aware of and say they're trying to prepare for, and it's getting closer and closer to the day where they actually like now it's time to worry about it kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that is the transition. And
I have
thing
the
is,
full,
okay,
I have the full quote if we want to give it because he
Yeah,
does give an example here. I feel like this is kind of lengthy, so bear with me for a second. So this is
That's fine.
the full translated answer, and again, early translations had some where there's some like arguments about the accuracy of them because they said like it was a little bit more strongly worded than the actual like kind of the official translation is. But here we go. We have already announced a portion of our software roadmap releasing up to next spring. Unlike the past, we continue to have a large variety of games scheduled to be released even beyond 5 years of release. This is because the Nintendo Switch has had such a smooth launch, allowing us to focus all of our development resources on a single platform. However, the question of whether we will be able to just as smoothly transition from Nintendo Switch to the next generation of hardware is a major concern for us. Based on our experiences with the Wii, Nintendo DS, and other hardware, it is very clear that one of the major obstacles is how to easily transition from one hardware to the next. To help alleviate this risk, we're focusing on building long-term relationships with our customers. While we will continue launching new software on Nintendo Switch, we will also provide services that also use Nintendo accounts and other IP outside of gaming software. We intend for this to help build a lasting impact with our customers.
Right. So
the concern thing here is the thing I think was one of the things real quick was that was some debate about that, but the point is they're focused on they want to have a smooth transition, and as you obviously can read between the lines, it's like, yeah, we have a huge install base. We don't want a repeat of the Wii to Wii U again. And even this DS to 3DS was a little bit, kind of botched out of the gates before they kind of recovered with that, and 3DS went on to do very well. But they clearly have a lot of momentum here. And yeah, what are your thoughts on this, Simmons?
I think this goes deeper than just the Wii. I mean, that's recent, and I realize there's definitely a lot of I think people get surprised when like you really start pulling these numbers out because like as the past gets further behind us, people kind of forget where Nintendo was and where they were from a financial and number standpoint. There's a lot of people who have this very fond, beloved memory of the GameCube era. And until the Wii U came out, the GameCube was Nintendo's worst selling home console. It was not doing great for them. They were in a funk. Yes, the Wii U was much worse, but there's sort of like, you got to remember that like this has been kind of a problem for Nintendo for a while now, and I think I think Furukawa's been around with the company for a long time, so he has to also be kind of aware of what's going on. And I just want to like going from Nintendo's own website, from their own stats. You have the Famicom, the Nintendo, and that sells 62. We'll round it up, right? 62 million, Nintendos were sold worldwide, right? And then the Super NES comes out and it was 49. So you went from 62 to 49. So it's less. The Super Nintendo sold worse, sold less software than the Nintendo. And then you get to the N64 and it goes from 49 to 33 million.
Mm.
So it's kind of like it's slipping a little
Yep,
more.
it's going down.
Software is 225 as opposed to 379.
Mm-hmm.
And the vast majority of Nintendo 64 sales came from North America. And then you have the GameCube. So you're rounding it up, you're at 22 million GameCube sold, 21.74. So let's just think about that. From the NES, you had 62, and then the lifetime sales of the GameCube were 22. So you basically had just been slipping every console generation. You lost 40 million like people who never came back. So they were just slipping. And then the Wii comes out and it goes to 101, 102 if you want to round it up, right? That's even better than the NES and the Famicom. That's like it's like 40% better, than the NES Famicom. Like that's how big a deal the Wii was as a home console. So they were on a slope, just going down every single generation. No matter how you felt about the consoles, no matter, most people would say like Super NES was the best console of all time. The GameCube was Nintendo's best era, and it's like all it was just downward for them. And then you had the Wii, which was this huge explosion, but then it was like you fell right down in the depths of hell with the Wii U. So you went from 102 to 13 and a half on the Wii U. So the Wii U was this huge disaster. And now here we come back again, come back strong with we're at 107, 108 rounding Switches sold, which is now even better than the Wii. So Nintendo has basically, we had a big hit and then we sold worse and then worse and then worse. And then we sold more than ever and then we did worse than ever. And now we've done even better than ever. Yeah. So I think Nintendo's looking at this and just going like, how do we not do this again? And it's a good thing to ask yourself because man, you don't want to have the pendulum swing super far back the other way where you have a system that somehow sells worse than the Wii U.
Yeah, exactly. So, like even I would say they would even be happy with like not a significant drop, just like even a tiny dip would be acceptable to them because how insane the momentum of Switch has been. Like if Wii U had even sold like 70 million or something, they'd probably be like, you know what, that's not too bad. But like
it's not too bad.
They can't.
It would still be more than the NES.
Yeah, like they can't have another drastic drop off like that. And you're absolutely right. So yeah, the great history here in these points. So my question now to you, Simmons, is like, what do you think is it going to take for them to achieve that smooth transition?
Well, the obvious answer is to not throw out everything that they've built with the Switch. And I think it's really important to note is that the digital age and through 2 years of this pandemic and everything, so much of people's libraries are now tied digitally to the Switch. And the last thing you want to do is do a full console refresh. Like the Switch was to the Wii U. Like the Wii U, you could play, all your downloaded Wii games, like WiiWare and stuff. And there was like $1 fee if you wanted like an HD, version of some of the games. But Nintendo went really scorched earth after the Wii U, just because they had a whole different online thing called Nintendo Network, and that's gone. And that was gone with the Switch. Yeah. And now they sell you the Nintendo Switch Online, which in a way is kind of what every company wants to do, because now you can't just go buy NES games or Super NES games or N64 games or Genesis games for some reason. You don't buy them. You pay for access through a subscription service to play the games, basically like a Netflix, like a Game Pass. You don't own them. But unlike Game Pass, there is no path to ownership of the Nintendo Switch Online titles. So you went from, you could buy the games you wanted on the Wii and technically the Wii U. And now the only way to play retro games is to pay a yearly subscription fee, or monthly if you want to do NES, Super NES, but yearly for N64. Yeah. I know people get real particular about, semantics there, but point is that it's probably like what Nintendo likes, because now you're locked into a subscription. You don't own the product. You have access to the product as long as you keep paying them yearly. So that's probably where Nintendo wants to be, but it also presents this other problem now too, where we're missing a lot of games. Like if you looked at what the entire scope and breadth of what the Wii Virtual Console offered, you had stuff like Commodore 64, you had obscure Japanese imports, you had turbo CD games. There's no option for that here. Like you have just Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Genesis, N64, and you have a very curated small selection of games, and it's basically like a sort of best of first party games, and then any third party games that are completely dead publishers. And the reason for this is usually because you look at why is there no Mega Man, why is there no Final Fantasy? Because Square wants to sell them. They want to sell them separately in their remaster collections or
Mm-hmm.
in their compilation games, the anniversary collections. So by having this weird subscription based model, we actually are getting less and less actual NES, Super NES titles. And I think that's already a bit of a raw deal if you were around for the Wii, for virtual console and stuff like that. And I think the worst thing Nintendo could do is do another scorched earth. We'll say like a new system and say we have a new online setup and none of your stuff transfers over.
Yeah.
So then it's like you got to like subscribe to a whole new thing, or and again with all the downloaded titles, because like you look at like Animal Crossing and people have done thousands of hours in Animal Crossings, like sometimes individually. The last thing, eventually they're gonna have to make a new Animal Crossing, but like you look at I just look at games like that and Splatoon 2 and 3 and I don't think people are going to want to just drop all the progress they've made with their titles on the Switch and just not have access to play them. What I'm getting at here is a very long-winded form of their next system needs to be fully compatible with the current Switch. And every single thing you bought and own on the Switch needs to transfer to the next system. And I have to say, because I was on vacation and I have a Switch OLED, I realized how insanely archaic and stupid it is to try to play. So I logged in. And I booted up each game that I had downloaded on my OLED, right before the flight. And then I get on the flight and I realize that if it's a downloaded title, it has to manually check in online every single time to make sure the software can be played. And I think it has something to do with like, is this not your main Switch, right? Where it's like, it's my account and I've logged into it. I logged into it that day, but
Yeah.
they want you to check online and when you're on a plane, you should be in airplane mode. You can't, check every downloaded game. So you have to like resort to like your cartridge games, but then you lose all DLC you've downloaded for it. Like they need to work out a better system for like transferring ownership around, because it's like, I feel like what they do with NSO is okay. Like if I go into Nintendo NES Online or Switch Online, like I do that before I get on my flight. Like I do it from my hotel room. I don't have to check in again. Like it's good for like, I don't know, a day or a couple days or whatever, right? But not the downloaded games that I paid money for. Super bizarre. Like stuff like that is something you really need to, I want to see ironed out for like a Switch 2, because when you transfer over to whatever successor you get, you need to be carrying those titles with you. Like, and this is talking about like Mario Odyssey. You're talking about like Kirby and the Forgotten Land. You're talking about stuff like that. Like, you bought these games. I shouldn't have to like dig out my Switch to play them on the next system. There's no reason in this day and age of scalability that you shouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah, it seems like, especially, we'll get into it in a sec, especially if they're going to keep like a hybrid format where handheld's going to be remain. Like it seems to be a handheld system not having that solution in place is definitely kind of problematic, and it'd be nice to see that ironed out. Now, I want to start with the first thing you talked about, like the retro catalog. Let's start there. The carrying over, I imagine the services will probably definitely carry over. Like Nintendo Switch Online, everything they've said and they've been building towards does seem like this is what this new account system has been for, will carry over. My question is about, honestly, for me, retro stuff might not be the most important of the things we're going to be talking about, but to some people it is very important. And I want to ask you about the potential future solutions they might do in terms of we saw today. And you even said, like, I know you already told me that, like, this should be expected. Like, companies should be doing this, period. And if they're not, it is a problem. Sony announcing the details of PlayStation Plus Premium and everything and extra and all those different ones, and that the retro catalog, if you had previously bought a PS1 Classic or a PS2 Classic, when those become available on the service, you already have access to them for free. And some of those games will be available piecemeal. So is that something? I think the latter one is probably the more relevant of like Nintendo ever allowing people to buy games individually again, like Virtual Console. So do you see Nintendo ever trying to do something like this? And which of these two, if either, do you think would be like very beneficial to people buying piecemeal? Or if you already bought, like, let's say they found a way, like, oh, I mean, they're never going to do this. So like the carrying over thing is like not going to happen because no one owns individual games anymore. It would have been, they did it from Wii to Wii U, but they're not doing it again. They're not going to go back and look at your Wii U purchases and be like, all right, you get these back. And like, they're not going to do that.
There is no reason for Nintendo not to offer individual sales. Now, from what I understand, Nintendo and a lot of third-party people in particular, like Sega, whatever, felt a little burned from Virtual Console because apparently like the numbers weren't really that great. But I think that's just sort of a mismatch of demographics there, where it's like, okay, you're selling TurboGrafx and obscure Genesis titles. The main audience on the Wii doesn't really care about that stuff or whatever. Man, I haven't really heard about it, so I can understand why, you know, Virtual Console sales for like some of the more crazy obscure stuff wasn't ever really that great. And I think it probably wasn't even great for Nintendo. They probably got like the early launch titles probably sold really well, and then after that it was kind of like like they sold okay whenever they came around here. You know, even Reggie talked about in his book about maybe using Earthbound Beginnings as a sort of gauge of interest, Trojan horse for somehow getting Mother 3 out here. But it's a Wii U and it came out late in the Wii U, so it doesn't that probably didn't sell anything at all. But so the idea is that, like, okay, Sony, your account for Sony for PSN does go back to the PS3. And if you downloaded, let's say you downloaded Xenogears for PS1, like you have it on your account for on your PlayStation 3, you know, like I do. If that shows up on PlayStation Premium, I can just download the title, just straight download. I don't have to sign up. I don't even have to sign up for PlayStation Premium. Like once it's on, you know, Sony's PlayStation Premium store or their live service, if they see that I own that title, like I paid real world money to buy it on PS3, I can now download it on my PS5 or PS4 because they're not there right now. Like there's a lot of PlayStation 1 games that just don't exist on PS4, PS5 that were available on PlayStation 3. And here's the thing, like I said, Nintendo did go scorched earth, but do you remember like about, I don't know, a month or two ago, Nintendo had this fun little thing on their website to see what was your most played Wii U title, your Wii U memories, and your 3DS memories.
Yep.
So guess what? Nintendo knows what you purchased on the Wii U and the 3DS. They even have a thing that they launched this year that lets you go back and look at which game did you play the most. So they actually, on your My Nintendo account, they know exactly what you played, what you owned on the Wii U, on the 3DS, and there is no good reason for Nintendo not to offer the same type of service that Sony's going with, to just be like, okay, I don't want to sign up for Nintendo Switch Online, but they know through your My Nintendo account, if it's linked, they know exactly what you own, what you played on the Wii U. So if you owned Mario 64 or Super Mario World on the Virtual Console, on the Wii U, and Nintendo knows it, it's in their account system, you should be able to just download that game a la carte on the Switch. There is no reason for them not to do that, other than it would eat into our Nintendo Switch Online sales, or their dinosaurus-esque belief that it would.
I mean, I think the answer is there. It's not just that. You're talking about like with the retro games, but also like the regular releases. How much of a uproar did people make about any of those Wii U games coming to Switch and being charged more money than like how
Yeah.
much they cost
Oh
at the
yeah, there's
time on
Switch
Wii U.
tax.
So like yeah, like the Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, if you own that on Wii U, wouldn't it have been nice maybe to even just pay like the $10 upgrade, like what Sony offers for some of
Yeah.
their games for
Well,
like
and I can
the next, yeah, but they don't even do that. They make you pay
well,
full price.
well, yeah, and I could understand them saying like, well, that was a disc-based system and this is a cartridge-based system. But I think if you digitally downloaded
That's what I
Tropical
meant. Yeah.
Freeze on the Wii U, you
Yeah.
should have had a upgrade path for say
Mm-hmm.
$20.
Yep.
They added new content to Tropical Freeze. I don't want to say they didn't, right? So I think like a $10 or $20, depending on like how much they added, right? I think that would have been a fair thing to like, hey, you did own this on the Wii U. We'll give you an upgrade path for like the Switch version, or you don't have to pay full price. Because the thing a lot of people forget, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze launched in February 2014, I believe, was for 2014 for $50. It was a $50 game. And then it was one of the early games to go on the Nintendo Selects line, where it spent a lot of its time afterwards as a $20 game. So you had a game that was $20, and this became a problem with Pikmin. Remember when they tried to get rid of Pikmin 3 from the Wii U eShop, so
Mm-hmm.
that people who were going to buy Pikmin 3 Deluxe for $60, it didn't look like, hey, wait a minute, why are you selling a $20 game for $60? And so when Tropical Freeze came out on the Switch, it was $60. It was more expensive day one on the Switch than it was day one on the Wii U. And all it added really was funky mode. Um, and funky mode is okay, maybe worth $10, right? So it's like it should have, again, if you had downloaded it through the eShop on the Wii U, you should have just been here. You want to pay $10 for Tropical Freeze with funky mode on Switch? Cool. I'm not saying they need to add like they should have like juggled different versions of the game on. No, I'm just saying like if you Nintendo knows what you digitally downloaded on 3DS and the Wii U. So if any of those games on the 3DS and the Wii U ended up coming over to Switch, and Nintendo knows you paid for it and digitally downloaded it before.
Yeah.
I understand physical is different, but if you did digitally download it and they know it, they should have given you an option to like, hey, you can re-download it for like a small fee, a small upgrade fee for the Switch
Okay.
rather than the Switch taxing. And I think that's one good way to keep in people's good graces for a new system.
Okay. So this would have solved a previous issue, but let's stay on the current line of backwards compatibility, because I think that's a part of the smooth transition.
Mm-hmm.
Is your current software should the expectation be there that your current software will just automatically work on a Switch successor? Like I don't think there should be it should just work inherently. I mean, I'm thinking even the cartridges should be backwards compatible with that, because I think they're going to stick with that. So you should be able, physical or digital, day one, I should be able to play these games on my new Switch, hopefully. Yeah. And if they do some kind of like enhanced version or whatever, then sure, like a nominal fee for like the upgrade, that seems to be the standard. As long as they do that, like, is that your expectation? Like, is that what people should be expecting?
Yeah, it is, because and the reason I say this is because you look at the PS5 and the Series S and X, and they're basically 100% backwards compatible, like 99.9% backwards compatible with PS4 and Xbox Ones. And the reason for that is they have similar architecture or whatever, but the whole way game consoles are developed now is with scalability in mind. We are long past the days where like, okay, you released a game on the Super NES, there was no way to scale that down to the NES. When you released a game on N64, no, there's no way to play it on Super Nintendo. Same with game, like even more relevant, like GameCube to N64. Like, no, the N64 could not run a scaled down version of any, first party, maybe WarioWare, but like there's no way like anyone, anything on N60, like, anything on GameCube could be scaled down to run N64. You have a game like Doom Eternal and Witcher 3, which have no business running on a Switch, no business being able to operate at all on that system, but they do because of talented developers and scalability. Like, again, like Doom Eternal should not run on the Switch, but it does. And that's why when you're talking about a new system, and again, they are going with NVIDIA. We know this from a corporate hack, which isn't an insider leak. This is like actual, honest to God, like corporate espionage
Yeah, like
bullshit.
illegally
Um,
obtained, but it's still
like
the truth.
we know they're working with NVIDIA again, and there's no reason for it not to basically be like fully backwards compatible. There's no reason not to. And I think industry wide, there's a perception like how far back, like the iPhone eventually stuff becomes outdated, right? We're on iPhone 13, 14, whatever, right?
Oh yeah, I have games on my iPhone 8 right now. I have an old iPhone by just
Yeah.
today's standards, but there's two games on there that when I try and go to them, it says like they don't run on this platform anymore. So like yeah,
Hmm.
stuff does on iOS does become outdated
It
eventually
does
for.
become, but it takes a little bit of time,
Oh yeah, it's not like one
like,
refresh is not generally like common as far as I
right.
understand. It's like
Which is,
years.
I think Nintendo kind of like, I know they like to march to the beat of their own drum, and they like, to be their own, like, again, their own dinosaur. But we're in an era where like when people buy mobile phones like every year, but like even if they don't buy it every year or every few years, most everything they buy on their mobile phone will transfer up, between the app store and Android, right? Like stuff sticks around for a while.
Hmm.
PS5 is still mostly playing PS4 games. Xbox Series X is still mostly playing Xbox One games or games that scale between both. So Nintendo could very, 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 very easily just, we have a new model. It's way better than the old model. However, everything from the old model still works here. And heck, we could even still, again, like, because when we're talking about a new, like say it's just an upgrade from what they have, another hybrid, a super switch, right? The long rumored whatever, right? No one in their right mind is expecting a Switch successor to somehow be as powerful as a PS5 or a Series S or X, right? No one's expecting that kind of power leap, right? You're probably, at best, you should be expecting like, okay, it's going to maybe match a PS4 vanilla, maybe a PS4 Pro, unlikely, whatever. I know the rumors talk about DLSS and 4K, but my point is that a straight up successor to the Switch is not going to be some massive technological leap forward. It can be a lot better, but again, you can still scale down. So if Nintendo wanted to say make Super Mario Odyssey 2, just making something up,
Yeah, yeah,
okay?
yeah, yeah.
Um and it's 4K, it uses deep learning super sampling, it's made for all these bells and whistles of the Switch successors, the Switch 2, but it could still actually run on the original Switch. It'll
Okay,
just
I
be
was gonna ask about this.
720p.
Yeah.
It's still 720p. Maybe it's only half the frame rate. It's exactly how Witcher 3 and Doom Eternal run on the Switch now. Like Nintendo can then scale down its own games because again, we are in the era of scalability. Now, the hardcore enthusiast in me kind of like, screams in terror at this idea because then you're sitting there like you're holding games
Cross,
back.
yeah, the old
And
cross
and
gen
and and
dread.
and,
Yeah.
and honestly, I, as a PS5 owner from day one, I feel that. I do feel like, man, my system's not really getting a lot of use. Like I'm still playing games that are made for PS4 and then just sort of bumped up, with PS5 and like, as in mind, like, hey, it's a PS4 game. It just runs better and looks a little nicer on PS5. And it feels like why do I have this giant next gen, looking system the size of a mini fridge, um, and it's not even really being used for any, like it's not being taken advantage of at all, and that becomes a problem because now we're what 2 years, almost 2 years in to the PS5's console generation, and like it has like 4 games that are only on PS5. So that's where I say the enthusiast, in me would be like, no, like don't make it forward compatible. Like don't make new Nintendo games forward compatible on the old system. Just run and look better on the new system. But the practicality in me just says, yeah,
Yeah,
whatever.
so that's the thing. I feel like Nintendo would be the most likely to embrace that and keep that going because it solves the following things. One, the small bump is going to capture the enthusiasts. They might not be happy, but enthusiasts Nintendo consumers generally show they will pay and like go for that like newer model. I mean, the breakdown showed that OLED wasn't the best selling of the three different Switch SKUs, but that it
Mhm.
still was selling pretty decently, especially compared to like Switch Lite, which
Yeah.
was selling outselling. So
Well,
my
Switch Lite dropped like a rock year to year.
yeah,
I thought that was interesting.
yeah. The point I'm trying to make is you're going to capture the enthusiasts because those are the people who want to move
Mhm.
forward. They want the better looking things. You're gonna keep getting those sales, but you're not abandoning the people who maybe are recent adopters of the Switch. And so to them, a Switch sale, I think they view a Switch sale as a Switch sale, whether it's the new Switch or the old Switch. It's like as long as those two numbers equal up to like what they have been selling with Switch right now, like 20 to 25 million range every fiscal year, as long as the combined sales of the Switch family are within that threshold, I think they're going to view it as a success to them, and that to them is maintaining a creating a smooth transition. So that's why I think they're more likely to do the what you were saying that you kind of dread as a enthusiast, because it appeals to more people and keeps that going. And Nintendo has
Yeah.
never been about that bleeding edge, like higher end thing. So like, I don't
Yeah.
think the Switch successor be such a leap forward that it'll be like a pain in the ass to make their games run on the older Switch models.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's probably, so I mean, I think as a future, you really kind of got to like just maybe you don't even have to embrace it, but you got to accept it. Like you got to just, mentally prepare yourself that what Nintendo might in all likelihood do is they come out with the Switch successor and it is beefier, but they still make games compatible with the old system. And part of me doesn't even mind that, honestly, because like it's like, okay, if you can get Breath of the Wild, for like the really mainstream, if you can get that to run at 60 and then really improve its FOV and depth of, whatever, depth of field, I forget the term, like ruined foliage stops popping in. If you push that out even further,
Mm-hmm.
man, I don't really care anymore about, I mean, yeah, it won't look like Horizon 2 or whatever, but it, with the number, with the sale, and I think we've seen it too with the sales of like Breath of the Wild 1, like it's a beautiful game, but you put it side by side with Horizon, and yeah, it looks real old. But at the same time, it's also like, yeah, but it also has good art style, and it still looks pretty, and I can still see to the horizon. It's still got the things I want in the game, even if it isn't the most like face meltingly gorgeous game with all kinds of like technology and artistry like running, super bells and whistles are running, whatever. I personally, you've been listening with me on here, me, like I'm most excited for Xenoblade 3. And I'm most excited for it because like Monolith has done magic. They did magic on the Wii with environments and the scale of environments and the artistry of the environments. And honestly, I'd be fine playing, Xenoblade 2 or 3 or definitive on a successor system that it just DLSS is like just upscales them and then it just runs them better. Like they start running at like 60 or or hell, like a stable 30, all the time 30. It's like I'm fine with this, man. Like yeah, I think art's going like it's starting to become more and more like, you know, I think the industry is kind of embracing the idea that like art is becoming really more important to selling your game now because we can make anything look as real as we want. Like if you saw that Unreal 5
Oh yeah.
Matrix tech demo, and
Yeah,
it's
we did that.
incredible.
Yeah, we tried that out
But
live.
it's
Yeah.
yeah, and it's also kind of like here's the thing, like yes, you can make a city look as as nitty-gritty detailed down to the down to the inches you want, but if you don't have a good art style, what's it gonna matter? Um so I think now we're really getting to that point where it's like, you know, we don't like we can make games as big and as expansive as we want. Now, Switch does have trouble with this on a lot of areas right now, but again, a lot of that kind of comes down to like if people are taking the time to like dig into that hardware now. But again, you look at Breath of the Wild, that is a Wii U game. Like
Yeah.
it still runs on the Wii U. Um, and it's like you can make games as big and as expansive as you want, but man, if you don't have the artistry to really sell that game, what's it matter kind of thing. So that's what you need more importantly now. So I think for me, I'm more into the idea of just I want games to run better, smoother.
Yeah, I'm with
And I'm a
you.
little personally, I'm a little tired of Switch games chugging, you know,
Yeah.
low IQ, low resolution or whatever. I just want the resolution and performance to be bumped.
So,
And so
so
I'm happy with just that.
yeah, so I'm with you with that. I'm definitely would like to see more stability in Switch games going forward, especially when the successor comes out. If that's like one of the specific things they target. One thing I want to get into, kind of writing off this, because you kind of postulated this like hypothetical about the hybrid format being for the successor, and I think that's probably a good guess. So I want to ask you one, or is it say? Do you think it's a good bet that they, or do you think they'd be crazy not to adopt the hybrid format again for the successor, or do you think they might abandon it? And two, specifically to Easy Allies, there was some feedback recently regarding our attitudes towards mobile gaming, and especially handheld gaming, and that maybe there's a bit of a disconnect for some of us regarding the appeal of playing games on the go and not having like some of that image quality, not having some of that stability, but the fact that you can just play it anywhere on the go is like amazing. Like the fact that you can play, I know Witcher dock mode doesn't even run, like it's a fantastic, you can even run at that, but like you can play it in handheld. So like people like, I don't care, I just want to play it. So one, yeah, what do you think about the hybrid format going forward, or do you think they can abandon it? And two, do you think more there's a good amount of attitude out there regarding the handheld format where they're more accepting of lower IQ, maybe not always hitting a stable, even a 30 frame stability?
I think Nintendo will probably stick with hybrid because it was so successful. If they were to abandon it, they would only abandon it for portability. They're never going back to home console only, at
Okay.
least not in the foreseeable. Because again, what would if Nintendo had a home-based console only? Like I know there are people out there who are just like, I just want a bleeding edge Nintendo, and I'm like, the GameCube was considered basically a failure. They're never going back to a set box top system that has no portability factor and is just that, because they can't compete with Microsoft's technology or whatever, and they don't want to, and they don't want to sell you a $500 home console. And again, the other thing is that for as global of a successful company as Nintendo is, they are still very insular when it comes to like, what do they design their systems around? They design it, well, honestly, they still design their systems around the typical Japanese lifestyle. They don't really go like think about what would America really like, or what would Europe like. No, they're mostly thinking about people who are on those commuter trains.
But also, like, to
So
expand upon that real quick, I mean, a lot more of the world is getting more mobile. Like, I mean, it's why
yeah,
the
and
phone
and
market's
they
so
are,
big.
and
It's
it's
like,
so
it's not even just that. It's like, it's just smart to have a portable system is probably a better idea than a set
well,
top
the,
box,
the
like a home
David and
console.
Goliath thing though is that everyone has a phone, and everyone's phone can
Mm-hmm.
do really good, can run really good
Yeah.
looking games now.
Yeah.
So it's kind of amazing in a sense that Nintendo's able to be successful in a handheld space, despite the fact that everyone has a smartphone now, and most people's smartphones can run games really well. Um,
I think it's the interface and the game design, because they're
yeah,
tailored
it's
to their own systems, because they are still a hardware manufacturer. I think that's their expertise. They're experts in making portable game machines.
mhm.
And while mobile phones can be game machines, that's not all they do. And so while they've definitely gotten better and they're very like they are the most popular platform, there's still a huge demand for more, something tailored
Yeah,
more specifically to maybe old school or traditional, however you want to call it, gamer interest. For
and again, I think just holding out kind of with the way they're going is good, because there's people like me who I only primarily play my system docked. Honestly, only when I have to get onto a plane do I pull out the OLED. And it's like, all right, and god dang, that OLED screen is beautiful. You know, that's the only time I'm really playing it portably is when I'm on like a big trip or whatever. But I mostly play it docked. If they can really come up with a decent a decent solution for docked play. Again, like all their successor really needs to do is bring in stability and resolution. If you can just nail down stability and resolution, a little bit better than what you got now, I think most people will be fine with that. And I'll be fine with that. And then you've got the portability factor for all the other people, because a lot of people only play their Switch portable. Heck, there's a lot of Switch lights out there. Um, and I think it's just the form factor. Like you can play any genre of game on a touchscreen. You can. I'm not saying you can't. I'm not knocking it. Some people like get good at it. But there's also a lot of people who are like, it just feels better to have that full configuration of buttons, face buttons, shoulder buttons, analog sticks. That's just some about that just feels way better to play, traditional games than playing that, with like, like
Yeah.
mimicked buttons and analogs on a touchscreen.
Tactile
Um,
feedback too. I mean, just like, and I'm talking about like haptics, just talking about like actual like the curvature of buttons, like the grooves, like how it
yeah.
like yeah, like the form factors you said, like
Mm-hmm.
I yes, a lot of us grew up with this, so like you could say like, oh, that's an old dinosaur mentality, but I also think to younger people, some people do like that feel. Like I've seen
Yeah.
people who play both and like, oh, I do like a controller, or like, I mean, you can like both. I don't understand. Like, it's not really an
Yeah.
either or,
It's not like the
honestly.
Switch
Yeah,
can't do either. Because again, a really unsung hero is, and people hate them because they don't work, but like none of them work. Is the Joy Cons? Yes, they
yeah,
drift. Everyone's drifts. I have three busted PlayStation controllers with drift. It's not a Nintendo only problem, but the Joy Cons, like you can slide them out, and now you have just like basically a tiny tablet. You could play like that if you wanted to, if someone wanted to do that. But I did this on the plane. You take it out. You had the much better kickstand on the OLED. Hand one off to your girlfriend. You sitting there playing. We're both playing Kirby co-op. Now the Joy Cons are a little tiny, for my big old gorilla fingers, but like Kirby for like 5 hours.
yeah.
Just that's something that you can't really do with an iPhone. Like you could like, hey, sync up with me, or like let's Bluetooth, or you could sit there and both kind of like, like play on your own system or whatever. But there is something kind of nice about just like plopping this thing, on like, the kickstand open. Hey, here's a controller. I got a controller. We got two controllers. Boom, like that. Um, there's something to be said for just how sort of like simple,
Yeah.
just a very pull it up and play it can go on regular Switch models. Obviously, the Switch Lite can't do that, but
Yeah.
um,
Um,
there's it's not just that it's a hybrid console, but it's like it does have unique things to like really make it playable in all kinds of different scenarios.
yeah. No, I will say I'm a primarily a handheld mode player of the Switch. Games that I big releases I'll play obviously docked, especially if I'm reviewing them. Like I'll always play that docked for capture. But I will always at some point start playing it in handheld mode. And I also got like an OLED now, and like yeah, that screen is amazing. But man, I just love the portability about it. So for me, I understand the desire of that bleeding edge Nintendo. You're like, man, I wish like Breath of the Wild could just like look like running on PS like on PC or something. Like why can't it like do that? But at the same time, I actually do. So from day like pretty much from day one, I've loved being able to just like play that system like because you used to always have to have you used to always have Nintendo console, Nintendo handheld. Now it's like you got both. You don't have to buy two things anymore, and I kind of love that. And
Yeah,
it was like the inevitable evolution of Nintendo's philosophy and business mo, and I really like it. So,
and
um,
and it's a really good point because that goes back to what Furukawa said.
mm-hmm.
He talked about we combined our portable and console developers,
Yep.
and this made it quicker and smoother to just have a streamline of game releases because there is no more portable system to worry about. And we're really seeing it took a while, but we're seeing the fruits of that labor. And then there was another, I don't know if it was an article or just like a topic brought up. It was a really good point, and that is Nintendo's pipeline is significantly better this year than both Sony and Microsoft. Like Sony's okay, right? But they had a couple big releases at the beginning of this year, but those were both releases that were delayed into this year. Like Gran Turismo 7 was delayed a lot. Horizon had a
Oh,
little bump,
yeah.
right? Okay, boom, boom. Horizon 2 and Gran Turismo 7. And, those are big titles that came out at the beginning of the year, but they were kind of like delayed into it. And you have God of War some point later in the year. And that's kind of all we know. Microsoft, no first party games this year whatsoever. As of right now, things could change in a month. But as of right now, there are no Microsoft first party games came out the first half of the year. No Microsoft first party games come out the second half of the year. Meanwhile, Nintendo has got a first party game or two practically every month of the year this year, like August and May kind of being the outliers. Although if Nintendo wanted to, they could dump Advance Wars out tomorrow, and have a May game. So that's saying in limbo, but like they have a pipeline of software to cover this entire year and into next spring with Zelda. So it's a really good point about how Nintendo's really coming out of this smooth. And another thing he said, which is important, is that we're 5 years into the console. You look back, and I know you'll remember this. The last year of the Wii U, that system only lasted 4 years. The last year of the Wii U was dead. It had Paper Mario Color Splash come out. And then you had the last year of not the last year, but like kind of the last year of the Wii. Like 2011 was a ghost town until Skyward Sword came out. And then it was a ghost town until the Wii U came out. And then on the Wii, and then the GameCube, same kind of deal. Like Twilight Princess was going to be the big swan song and ended up becoming like a Wii launch title. So 2006 was a ghost town for for the GameCube.
Yeah.
And that last year of the N64 in 2001 was a ghost town. They bumped Paper Mario into like April 2001 just to have something to sell before the GameCube came out. And
so this like them having a good pipeline this year and for the foreseeable future is very good for this smooth transition potentially, because the Nintendo can maintain a steady flow of games.
Yeah.
They won't have that kind of drop off of there's nothing coming out, and like even if it's these games, we're expecting these games to run on both systems when eventually the successor comes out. Like that just makes it more enticing to play, because even if you don't have next gen only games ready to go, it's like you need to have something ready to go. And also
I think we're already. Yeah, go ahead.
Real quick, you said Zelda in spring. That's just your expectation. We haven't had a release date yet for
correct.
A while. Yeah.
Correct. They said spring.
Yeah, so it's just like
that's what they said. But like the thing is, I think it's a good point is that they're not. They did this too much. They did this Wii U, Wii, GameCube, N64. They left their systems basically out to dry before the next system came along.
And that's a terrible recipe for continuing momentum.
Yeah,
like
and it was
to stop your old system in the tracks and like just force everyone to jump onto the new one.
Yeah,
like that's not a smooth transition.
And that came about because I think they just had to have everyone focused on new hardware. We need to have launch games ready, so you can't be making games for the old stuff. And the real big problem there was like this goes all the way back to the N64 and stuff, where it's like it did not take as many people or as long to make a big video game, in 2000, 2001 didn't, but they still had to basically leave the system out to die so they could have a bunch of stuff ready for the GameCube's launch. But again, we're not in that era where the console generations are the leaps make it impossible to have both system games. What I'm saying is like we're not in an era where like they had to make Luigi's Mansion and Pikmin and Smash Melee, and they couldn't make that on the N64. You couldn't have a downgraded N64 version. Just couldn't do it. You had to have that on GameCube only. So they had to leave the N64 to die. They had to leave the GameCube to die. They didn't really have to leave the GameCube to die. Wii was basically a GameCube. That's on them. But Wii U with their HD, and Miyamoto has talked about in the past about, HD development was more costly and time consuming than we thought it would be. I'm like, come on, Miyamoto, you had like 10 years of watching the other guys flounder around. How did you not? Whatever. So I think we're seeing right now, they're already like, we're not going to leave the Switch out to die with software. And I think a big part of that to me is the fact that their next system will be a hybrid and it will be forward compatible. And in fact, this is me. This is theory crafting, but I have a very strong feeling that a lot of games coming out this year are going to run better on Nintendo's next system next year. And why do I say next year? Because Furukawa was interesting in what he didn't say at this
Oh,
investors meeting.
yeah.
He declined to comment about an investor asking about if there was going to be new hardware launched this year. And he has always typically said, we have no plans. We have no plans. 3 months later, here's the new thing. We have no plans here. Now he's like, I'm declining to pleading the fifth. To me, that might as well have been a confirmation from that guy.
Now, maybe, and like that's the thing. Just always keep in mind that trying to predict what Nintendo do based on past stuff isn't always the best recipe. However, he's talking to investors here, so what he says is very important, and I think it's a little bit safer in this context to read between the lines and like draw conclusions from these types of statements.
People are going to be whatever. I don't know why people get mad about stuff, but and if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. It's not, no skin off my back. It's not the end of the world. But I think Breath of the Wild 2 is being prepped for a successor. It's going to run on both. It's going to run better on the successor.
I wouldn't be surprised by this in the least bit. Yeah.
And I think there's going to be updates, whether it's free, it probably will be free for Bayonetta 3 and Splatoon 3, and probably Xenoblade 3, since Monolith Soft's making both Breath of the Wild and Xenoblade 3.
What if those upgrades are paywalled behind NSO? If you're if you're a premium member, you get the free upgrade.
Ooh, that would be dirty. They'd do it too.
They would, wouldn't they?
Dirty.
Yeah, they would.
I mean, I'm already paying for the N64 game, so for me, it'd be like, whatever.
Yeah, but I mean, that would get people don't care about the retro catalog, and people don't care about DLC. They just care about new game experiences. And play in the best way possible. That might be a way to entice them, because that's always a question.
The Super Switch experience now available for Splatoon 3, Bayo 3, Xeno
Investors
3.
always grill Furukawa about how you're going to increase the appeal of NSO, and like that's another idea they could throw into there.
That'd be dirty. But you know what? I again, this is all just me. I am predicting that a lot of the second half games this year will have some sort of upgrade path, because that kind of happened. That happened with the Super Game Boy. There was a bunch of games that were, not even made for the Super Game Boy Mine, but had Super Game Boy enhancements. That happened with the DSi a little bit. It happened with the new 3DS. Mm-hmm. Some games were retroactively better. Like I remember Smash Brothers 3DS. It had small advancements. If you played it on a new 3DS, it would load way faster, stuff like that. Like it would just, the performance would be get a little kick. So I actually expect that. Like I actually would not be surprised if, come end of July, come early August, the data miners get a hold of Xeno 3 and they're like, what's this pathway for running the game, with super sampling? What's this mean, huh? Like I'm not going to be shocked if that happens, whether it was Xeno 3 or Splatoon 3 shows up and they start seeing stuff in the code that's like calling to like, Game Boy Enhance mode, right? Like Shantae did on the original Game Boy Color if you played it in an advance. So that's my prediction. And when Furukawa declined to comment about a hardware release, to me, that was like everything's lining up. Like Breath of the Wild 2 is going to run on Switch. It'll run better on a successor. It'll launch with a successor. And there'll be like a few games, probably late games this year, that'll take small advantage of the new hardware. And then going forward, at least for like another good few years, Nintendo will release games. They'll play on the Switch. They'll play better on the Super Switch, whatever they end up calling it. And to me, that it's good that they're taking this seriously, or at least like acknowledging the fact that, we every time we have a super success, we're met with a downgrade afterwards. I'm glad they're sort of acknowledging and seeing that, and kind of actively trying to avoid those mega drought years that Nintendo typically like tends to do at the end of a system's life. So I'm glad that's not happening, or at least they're trying to prevent that from happening. Um, but that combined with his non-committal about hardware, I'm like,
Yeah.
this really seems to be lining up.
There's
Like
yeah.
Nintendo's unpredictable until they are predictable.
Exactly, and there's been a lot of like we've talked about a lot in the past, but I mean, there's been a lot of smoke around this like too that we don't need to get into, but like has been the subject of discussion in past episodes about specifics of it. You brought up a few and stuff like DLSS being rumored 4K, and it's like where there's smoke, there's fire, and there's enough people pointing to this type of stuff that like within the next near future amount of years, there's like there's a successor coming. Yeah,
and I think there's other things too. Like it's not a big game, it's not a big deal, but people were noticing today or yesterday, whenever the trailer came out for multiverses, the free to play Warner Brothers fighter, right? It's not on Switch, and that seems like an oversight. But on the same token, it's like I feel this is going to start happening more and more, where like games are just not, they've scaled as hard as they can scale. Now, multiverses could definitely run on a Switch. I'm not saying it can't, but I'm wondering if we're getting to a point where, especially with third parties who don't ever typically do as well as first party on Nintendo hardware, like it is not worth it for us to be porting our games down to your system. We don't get the return on numbers. The real killer could be something like Fortnite, because they moved to Unreal Engine 5. What if they move to a version of Unreal Engine 5 where they're like, it's not worth it for us to support the Switch any longer?
I mean, I feel like this is just more evidence potentially of why this successor might be coming. Like, sure, multiverses might not be on Switch, but like potentially maybe it's like, well, we have back in the background, they're like, well, we have plans to put it on the successor. We just can't say it yet because they haven't announced it yet.
And again, maybe it's more just a thing of just kind of like, we're just going to see less and less and less and less third party support on the system. And that's usually doesn't really mean much for Nintendo or Nintendo, the diehard fans. But there are a lot of casual fans out there there are a lot of people who still play, Assassin's Creed, still play, their FIFAs and well, there's not FIFA anymore, but whatever. And like
about that, yeah.
Yeah, and their Maddens and whatever, right? And it's like they don't. Some of these some of the biggest games just don't show up on the Switch. Like GTA 5 could easily run the PS3 version on the Switch, no problem, but it doesn't. Maybe it's not worth it for Rockstar, but it's like there's a lot of big casual numbers that Nintendo's not quite is kind of a little not like missing out on entirely, but kind of missing out on like a little bit. Where say if you have a successor come along and it can run some of these titles where it's like, hey, you don't have to do cloud versions. You can just run RE8 in 7 in we all know Force coming. Like run it on the Switch 2 or the Super Switch. Like it's not going to be a super, time or money intensive thing to port it down, to the regular Switch. Like, so you start seeing a lot of exclusively Super Switch games by third parties just show up. And then it's kind of like, that's good for Nintendo because that incentivizes people to upgrade, which is what you want eventually anyways. But it's like, yeah, imagine we're starting to get like some of like these big games. Like what if, let's just think about this for 10 seconds. You have a Super Switch. What's one of its launch games in March 2023? Elden Ring. On the go. Only plays on Super Switch. Big incentive right there for everyone to just like, oh.
I
wouldn't mind doing another run.
I would absolutely get Elden Ring on a Switch successor if it ran at like at least stable 30. Yeah, if it could run at stable 30, I would like absolutely play that on the go, man. So
just pointing that out there, where it's like that, like Nintendo can use third parties as their own incentive beyond just like, hey, better running Breath of the Wild, but they can use third parties as like, incentives to get people to buy a Switch successor.
This all makes sense.
That would be very, very tempting for me, honestly. Especially if like they say the successor has an OLED screen.
Which it,
Probably won't for cost cutting. I don't know.
no, it
Maybe.
absolutely will have it.
But if it
Like
has
I
like an, yeah,
think it would be
imagine an
weird for
OLED
it not to
screen.
have it at this point.
I'm just saying, imagine an OLED screen and it actually has way beefier hardware, so we can run Elden Ring at a decent enough rate, right? Mm, that'd be great on the next plane trip or where, whatever, next long car ride. And to me, that's a big incentive for me to upgrade.
Yeah.
If that's something that comes
Oh,
down
and
to
it'll
it.
be
But
perfect because it'll also be like the definitive edition, like not definitive, but what are they called? Like like Game of the Year edition, whatever. Because like there's
yeah,
probably gonna be
goatees.
because you gotta get that DLC that's eventually gonna be announced,
Yeah.
obviously, and like that'll probably be in there. So I mean, those types of like versions also do great. But you're right. This is all like this is a good
It's
strategy.
speculation, but like I feel like this is getting closer and closer to reality. And again, if we look beyond,
Yeah.
we haven't seen what Nintendo's doing for E3 this year, and they still have June, September, and February, um, coming up. But it's like beyond Breath of the Wild 2, which has been, was supposed to be this year. All we really have left from them is Metroid Prime 4. And I'm sure I
Oh,
am
of
sure they
actual
have.
announced things. I
Yeah, and
mean,
I'm sure they
sure.
have many, many things
Yeah.
in store. I'm sure they do. But I think even for Nintendo, we're getting long in the tooth on the Switch because it's like you have your Mario Kart, you have your Mario mainline Mario, you have your 2D Mario, sort of. I guess they haven't done like an exclusive 2D, but they have Mario Maker 2.
And
But
they
like you've
have the
done your
port.
yeah, you've done your
Yeah.
Animal Crossing, you've done your Paper Mario, you've done your WarioWare, you've done multiple Zeldas, you've done multiple Xenoblades now, you've done at least one big Fire Emblem, you've done multiple Musos, like they've they've gone through their they multiple Kirby's, they've gone through a bunch of stuff. You have your Yoshi game, everything, and now we're now churning out sequels now, which Nintendo is like kind of a little rare unless you're one of like they're sort of like forgotten unwanted franchises for Nintendo like Star Fox and F-Zero now where they don't want to touch it anymore. um, you pretty much have your staples from Nintendo's first party, and now you've had staples and your sequels to your staples. I could really use a new Donkey Kong, just saying, but but like yeah, we've gotten to the point now where not only did we get a Luigi's Mansion, we've got a Mario Strikers out now, and a heck in Advance Wars if it ever does come out. So it's like my point here is that like Nintendo's run through its staple of franchises for the system, which they generally only do one, maybe two of per system. So now it's a good time to start thinking about why don't we do a successor, and then you kind of like refreshing, where then you get into your MK9, Mario Kart 9, not Mortal Kombat, Mario Kart 9, and your next big 3D Mario, your next whatever, right? Your next Animal Crossings, your next what have you. It's about time to start going into that, I think.
Yeah. I will say I know the counter argument to this. People are like, "Well, it's doing so well. I already own this. Like, why are you like pushing for a new like successor when everything's doing so well? Like, why can't we have 2 or 3 sequels on a single hardware?" And I mean, yes, this is all very true. But like, the point is, they want to have a smooth transition. It is good to with this momentum going to move on to a successor while you've got this momentum going and like introduce sequels on these. And as we said, like there could be like a forward compatible, backward compatible situation where like the games will run on both systems anyway. So like you're not going to be left in the dust. Like I truly think Nintendo is going to embrace that. So I wouldn't really. I personally wouldn't worry about it. I mean, if I'm
and that's
wrong,
what
I'm
I
wrong,
and
but I don't think I will be.
that's what I think a smooth transition is.
Yeah.
That's what a smooth transition is saying like we're going to have our sort of next gen bump, but it's going to be compatible with the old system as well. No one's getting left out.
Yep.
We're just sort of incentivizing you to upgrade your system a little bit to
Ex-
get a little bit of a little better a little nicer experience on that newer model. And if you
Mhm.
don't have the money, or you can't find it, no worries, you're not missing out on the game. You can still buy the game, you can still play the game. It's still going to run, it's still going to run, you're still going to be able to enjoy the game. It's like a ton of people with, well, I mean, it's on PC, but like a ton of people with Elden Ring. Like, not a lot of people can find a PS5, for
Yeah.
what. So it's like no one's missing out. They just bought the PS4 version, had a good old time. Um,
Yeah.
Played low end specs on PC. So I think that's what a smooth transition is. A smooth transition is basically saying, like, we're not going to slow down our production because we have to stop developing games for this little garden walled off console and then start moving to the next plot of land, and it's its own little walled off garden of hardware and whatever. No, our smooth transition is knocking down those walls and kind of like letting you intermingle between both sets of hardware
Yeah,
where you
and
can still
I
play it
think
on both.
and I
We're not
think you're
slowing down
very
production on any
right
game.
about sorry, the you mentioned like the shortages with PS5. This strategy is also very smart in case for whatever reason the components for the Switch's successor aren't as easy to come by. It means, hey, if you're still not able to snag a Switch 2, you're also not going to be screwed out of these games because they still will be playable on your OG Switch models. So everything we're saying here absolutely adds up to what I think is like what they are thinking of. It's not just, it's like behind the scenes business stuff as well as like the software plans that they have going. And I think honestly, I think within the next 6 to 12 months maximum, we will be hearing about talk from Nintendo themselves about the successor. That would be my wager at this point. So because I do think it's very likely, like you said, that like Breath of the Wild sequel could be that flagship title to push the launch of the successor, as well as some of the more recent games
I mean,
leading up to it having enhancements possible on it as well. Like I agree with you on all that stuff. So I
the
think
only time like Zelda has been super successful outside of a launch has been Ocarina of Time. And that was, you were there for that. You remember that was the most hyped up game in existence. That was like Cyberpunk GTA 5 levels of hype, and whatever, when that game, that was the most hyped thing in humanity in video gaming at the time. But other than that, and even then that only pushed however many. The only time Zelda's ever really crashed through big time numbers wise was first Twilight Princess on the Wii, and now Breath of the Wild. So I think Nintendo looks at that. They look at the numbers that Skyward Sword did. They look at the numbers Majora's Mask did, and they kind of can see already. I'm like, a Zelda game released on its own in the middle of a console's life cycle doesn't reach the numbers that a launch Zelda does. And I think Breath of the Wild, to me, is just like, they have to know that if you had Breath of the Wild 2 coming out on the Switch, just the Switch, there is no successor, there is nothing else. It's never going to sell anywhere
yeah,
close to as much as Breath of the Wild 1 did. And this game has been costly for them. They've been working on it forever. So it's taken a lot of time and a lot of effort to get this sequel done for whatever reason. And part of me is just like, and their best, I would say the best outlook is like they sell 12 million copies of Breath of the Wild 2, maybe. If there was no successor, if there was no new system, and it was just, hey, comes out in March on like the 6-year anniversary of Breath of the Wild 1. I think you have like a Frozen 2 situation where it's just kind of like it comes and goes real fast. Isn't anywhere near the phenomenon of the first game. But if it's tied to a fresh hardware launch and it's like this, oh my God, you got to get this with this, and everyone's busting down the doors trying to get the Super Switch, and then they're going to get Breath of the Wild because it's going to look and run the best on that, and then everyone else has FOMO, it's like, crap, I can't find a Super Switch, but you know what, it still runs on my Switch. I'm not going to miss out, I'm not going to miss out just because I can't find it. I'll still get in. So everyone joins in, and I think Nintendo has to know this, and this is why I'm like, this whole push to spring, I'm like, that's because I think Nintendo knows that like the best chance for getting the maximum amount of sales out of Breath of the Wild 2 is launching it with hardware.
Yeah.
That's my personal belief. Like
I
that's
think
the
I
best
so
way to get the highest number of
yeah.
numbers.
I'll close out by saying I think its maximum potential would be achieved if it was launched alongside new hardware because it makes it even more of a tentpole event. The sequel on its own, I think, is going to be a big deal, but like you're kind of right that like it has the potential to be flash in the pan where it's big. It's big, but it doesn't have the same longevity as the original one. It like kind of just like passes us over after it's like week or two in the limelight, and then and no one remembers it. But if it's tied to a new hardware, it's kind of like still in the headlines for a little bit longer at the very least, and it like it bolsters.
It gets
Yeah,
tied to that
yeah.
hardware.
So I think that's totally plausible, but I also again also would I think you're the same mentality. If it doesn't happen, that's like so be it. You know, there's still a sequel coming, and like I'm
Yeah.
sure it'll be like good and stuff. Just like a lot of their games have been, but
Yeah, and
yeah,
again, if none of this comes to pass, if I'm just totally wrong, I'm told, and it's very, it's very possible. I'm just totally off base on all my predictions here. Oh well.
yeah,
I'm still getting
it's
I'm still getting Breath of the Wild
it's
too. I'm
fun.
still
Yeah,
getting
yeah.
my
You're still
game.
that's like the games are still coming, so. Yeah, but yeah, I think that's pretty good discussion there on what we think the smooth transition is going to be. Obviously, if you had some different ideas or something that we missed, let us know in the comments. We'll check those out. Yeah, I want to thank you again for joining me, Matt, to talk about this, especially after coming
Oh
back
yeah.
from getting some rest after that long vacation of yours and that long flight back, which served as good fodder for talking about Switch and its limitations in the handheld mode. Yeah,
Oh my god! And really, the only big limitation was just the way that their online check-in system works,
yeah,
where it's just like, why is it like this?
whatever.
But
Yeah. So like when I was playing with the Switch Lite a lot and made it my secondary system, anytime we didn't have internet or something, like shit, I can't play anything because all my games are there digital. I'm like,
yeah,
thanks Nintendo. It's like, but whatever. Who knows if they'll change that?
yeah,
But
they need to work on their check-in system. Like,
yeah.
give it like a 24-hour block for God's
Yeah,
sake.
that's what a lot of them do. Like even rentals stuff like you do that first check. You have a time window where it's now good for this long. So it's like just
Yeah, which is what NSO does. NSO does that. They give this like some
Oh yeah,
time
they do
window
that
after
too. Yeah,
checking
yeah,
these
yeah. They
months. So
do too.
why are digital
The-
download games not?
yeah.
Why do they have to check in every like this is Xbox Bowl?
Oh, Nintendo.
This is
Oh.
like the original envision of the Xbox One crud.
Oh yeah, I remember that for sure. Yeah, but they also having some issues though recently. To be fair, the network issues with Xbox.
Oh God, I heard about
Recently,
that.
there was some issues with this too, but that was like their network being down. So that was this all digital future for some people. It's got lots of promises and potential, but remember, there's also some pitfalls while we work through the technological part of it, and got to get that internet and ISPs to be where they need to be someday. We'll see. But yeah, thank you, man, for joining me. And before I let you well, actually, just do it now, man. For those of our listeners and viewers who want to follow you and check out more, where the usual, where can they hit you
You
up?
can find our archives of our big streams at youtube.com/yo video games. And then I am on twitch.tv /assist me doom. All one word. Every Monday, I play a Monolith soft game. We are doing a Xeno Legacy leading up to July 29th, where I play every single Xeno game except the weird mobiles stuff for Xenosaga, because there's no way for me to even play that anyways. But I'm already past all that. I'm past Xenogears and past Xenosaga, thank God. We are starting the Blades. So if you want to, Monday nights, if you want to see me play the Xenoblade games, including the including the forgotten one, Xenoblade X, you can check out twitch.tv/assist me doom.
Nice. We also have some shout outs for the month of May 2022. These are our high tier patrons, as well as some of the people above the shout out tier. So for this month, it's Jabawabs, El Thanis, Greg the Dark Knight Kettering, Caleb Togi Crawford, Nick, and Anna Croft. Shout out. Thank you so much to all of you for your generosity. And yeah, just a reminder, we are weeks away, not even a month, weeks away from the Keeley event, his little press conference thing, the Summer Game Fest kickoff thing that he's doing. We got Bethesda, Microsoft's got a date. Jeff Grubb talking about
You,
Sony being in the first week. We got
it's kind
we're
of
getting there.
funny.
We're close.
It's kind of funny how a little while ago they're like the Xbox and Bethesda game showcase, even though Bethesda is Microsoft, whatever. And I'm like, so is it now an apology to her
Oh,
for both of Bethesda's games not making? Which, you know what, I am super glad about that. I know it's terrible for the people looking forward to it, but I'm like, bro, can you imagine a Bethesda game coming out that doesn't have to be fixed by modders? Like, let's just think about that for a minute here. Think how nice that could be. Like a smooth transition to Starfield launch. That's for the Xbox fans out there. It's good. It'll be good. It's better in the long run. And of course, whatever Nintendo does, which they haven't announced anything, but it's like it's going to be real awkward if Nintendo doesn't do something in June.
yeah,
Like real awkward if they don't.
yeah.
And they got enough to talk about. Come on, they got 2 games in June, Xenoblade 3 in July. Stolen from Splatoon in September. I've seen some salt online about that, and I just find it hilarious.
Yeah, I do expect by the next episode we'll be at least hearing rumors of when Nintendo's event is going to be. So I am planning to make the next episode, for those interested, be the kind of like the preview predictions episode for what
you gotta make a bingo chart.
Yeah, from Nintendo's Summer Direct, and then the episode after that will very likely will be the week of them doing their direct. I hope, like, it's usually that's the week they do it. I'm hoping it's that Tuesday, and right after all that happens on Tuesday, I think we will probably try and do a live episode discussing everything we saw and thoughts and impressions on that. But yeah, good few weeks coming up here for everyone, not just like Nintendo stuff, but for just like game industry stuff in general. So we're almost there. I know it hurt, it stung that there's no E3 proper, but I have a feeling that the announcements from these conferences this year might be a little bit more juicy than they were last year, after last year's kind of a bomba fest of a.
Hey, last year Nintendo had to save everyone.
So Nintendo had a decent showing, and Elden Ring saved the Summer Game Fest kickoff, but man, there are a lot of stinkers in there, but I don't think it's going to be that case this year. We got a lot of stuff. So buckle up. We are almost there. And until then, may the way of the hero lead to the Triforce.